Oculus and HTC compete for customers in a number of ways, including not just specs, but also the kinds of data they collect and use about the people who buy the devices. As someone with a quasi-legal background for employment, I discuss these sorts of issues from time to time, and people tend to enjoy them. So today, I'm talking about the privacy policies for both the Rift and the Vive. The result may surprise you, so stick around. Let's chat about it in the comments below, or over on Reddit, linked below as well. But first, my opinion. I'm Tarmack, and this is Feature Creep. The Oculus buyout by Facebook put the company into the unenviable position of attempting to contend with Facebook's rather fluid definition of privacy. For those not aware, Facebook has had a number of privacy-related faux pas, including things like hidden privacy settings, posting material without the ability for users to hide it, and of course, the most important of all, selling personal information to ad agencies. So it wasn't much of a surprise when the Oculus privacy policy was made public that people quickly found a number of issues held within its legalese terminology and headache-inducing verbiage. We'll talk about theirs first, HTC and Valve second. I'm not going to go over every clause, but we will talk about what information is collected, and I'll go over the areas of privacy agreements that bug me. To start with, Oculus via the Rift headset collects information about the user. This information includes detail that you intentionally provide, such as billing and shipping information when you're purchasing products. It involves details such as name, phone number, and birth date when you sign up for their services. Your messages sent to other users are collected and stored as well. The collection of information also details how you interact with the services. This information involves things like your IP address, applications and games that you use, the kind of device you're using, unique identifiers associated with the specific device that you use, what applications or games that are installed, including not just the ones hosted by Oculus, but also third parties. Further to that, the information includes location details such as GPS or cell tower detail, and also information about your physical movements, quote-unquote, and dimensions. Now, all of these can be explained away. Physical movements, for example, with VR could easily be explained by head motion tracking, IP addresses needed to connect to and from servers, those sorts of things. Where we divert further, and the clauses that people tend to be finding issue with, are what exactly Oculus does with the data after it's been collected. If each use was merely an inherent value-added function of the software we're using, then there's no cause to complain. This section of the privacy policy is where I begin to get a little bit edgy because Oculus is being overly transparent in what they're doing with the information. Good, I suppose, but also questionable from a consumer standpoint. It's also just as important, in my experience, when drafting agreements and policies and other such legalese, what you say is as important as what you don't say. First off, Oculus shares detail with related companies, which goes on to specify groups that are part of Facebook. So this would include Instagram and WhatsApp, things like that. Facebook as a corporate entity maintains a collated database record of its users. They can, of course, link together detail about a particular user's activity on Facebook itself with that same user's Rift VR experience, while also linking it to what they post in their Instagram feed. Now, there'll be many who know all of this, but some who don't. This is how Facebook makes money. It's also how Google makes money. These companies specialize in the collecting, analyzing, and parsing of data, which is provided in, for the most part, a demographic data set scrubbed of personal information provided to advertisers. If Facebook knows that you like Elite Dangerous, the Facebook page, post videos to a YouTube channel on your own Facebook page about space sims, and share pictures of SpaceX launches, that just maybe Robert's Space Industry ads for Star Citizen need to show up in the sidebar for you. And as a little aside, this may sound like an extremist statement, but Google is the single most dangerous entity in the world right now because of the sheer volume of data that they have. The only reason we aren't advertised to every moment of every day by Google is because they haven't yet gotten commercial self-driving cars capable of delivering context and location-sensitive ads regulated and on the road yet. I remember a story more than a decade ago about how Target began sending maternity ads to a teenage girl in the States. And when her rather irate father snapped at Target management, the father, daughter, and local media somehow found out that nobody except Target knew that she was pregnant yet because of how her buying patterns had changed on her Target card. Now consider that same level of computational prediction and add it to your entire internet history, email contents, YouTube preferences, friends networks, and you can imagine what the current state of advertising expertise involves. Back to the privacy policies though. When drafting agreements, whether contracts or merely aspirational documentation, what you say is often just as important as what you omit. As a result, I have a few issues with the Oculus privacy policy. As I mentioned, it's odd that the privacy policy is so upfront about information collecting being for advertising and marketing purposes. So where it gets a bit odder is in a clause about de-identified data. The clause specifies that data with the name and contact information removed can be shared with other third parties for any reason at any time by Oculus. The inclusion of that clause indirectly implies that all of the other specified reasons which don't count under this ending catch-all mean that they are or can and will be sharing identifiable data. That said, for the most part, the identifiable information being shared does have limitations. This refers to public information such as what you post yourself, app developers mining data much like phone apps currently do, related companies working under the Facebook umbrella that it'll be shared to, service providers for billing, shipping, etc., and under certain business transactions, which goes on to detail acquisition, where your information could become owned by another company. So here's the thing about the Oculus privacy policy in the grand scheme of the world. It's actually not all that bad. Getting down to brass tacks, the privacy policy essentially says that Oculus will collect data to give you the services through the Rift that you want and primarily for that purpose only. They will market to you, but that's handled internally through the Facebook marketing wing. I'm not keen on the Rift getting so much data for that purpose, which is ultimately my biggest beef with the system though. This is a new wonderful peripheral. Don't reduce it to an ad platform, guys, which is what they're clearly doing. And yes, third parties may be able to access your data, but that's only if you install third-party applications, just like any other thing you might install on your computer. Now, what about the HTC VIVE? Unfortunately here, we actually need to consider two privacy policies. One developed by HTC themselves, and the general Valve Steam policy as Steam VR is integrated. HTC's privacy policy goes through many of the same pieces of information that Oculus collects: name, address, GPS location, IP address, billing detail, and all manner of other things about you. And then they go on to explain a near carbon copy of the methods of sharing, those being legal compliance, business deals like acquisitions, consent, service providers, and of course the nebulous de-identified data for any purpose clause. So what about Valve? I've seen the argument made that the Valve privacy policy has some stark differences, and that is certainly true. Valve will not share identifiable information about you with third parties, with the exception of service providers for things like warehousing, shipping, and payment processing. Interestingly, Valve also has a clause stating that they will not knowingly collect personally identifiable information about people under the age of 13, which is a notable absence from the privacy policies of both Oculus and HTC. And all three of them have clauses whereby users can contact them to request deletion of personal information, though there is no requirement legally to comply. But just to jump back to HTC for a moment, they specifically have a clause written into their privacy policy for the sharing of information with third-party ad agencies, and it doesn't exclude identifiable information from it. So does it really matter that the Valve policy doesn't permit that? Not so much, no. It pains me to say this because as a reasonably staunch grumpy pants about how Facebook operates, these privacy policies are for the most part the same. In fact, there is far more reason for concern about the HTC privacy policy than the Facebook or Valve ones. HTC uses third-party advertising agencies, and the policy has a little clause about how they're not responsible for how those companies use your information. So in reality, HTC is actually exposing your information to outside organizations, whereas Facebook keeps that part of the operation in-house, and Valve at least commits to scrubbing the identifiable information out first. With the Rift, we have one privacy policy to deal with where it comes to identifiable information sharing, and that information is being shared in-house in other Facebook companies. With the Vive, we have Valve, HTC, and whatever third-party ad agency that HTC contracts with to consider. And even more unfortunately, as you can see under the link in the description, HTC works with a group called the Network Advertising Initiative, which has 101 member companies. Do you want to comb through the privacy policy of all 101 of those companies? Yeah, I didn't think so. Neither do I. I know that the topic of choice is a bit on the heavy side today, much like it was when I was delving into the Trans-Pacific Partnership, so it's a bit difficult to get some discussion going via questions. Based on the privacy policies that I have outlined though, I would still like to have a chat and can address any questions that people might have about the legalese language used in these policies. I'm not a lawyer, but I deal with agreements for a large organization on a daily basis in my day job, and I'm pretty proficient at identifying and closing loopholes at this point. Feature Creep is a regular show every week, and you should be subscribed because the gnome demands it. Thanks for watching. That's all I have to say. Tarmack out.